Today we're going to go through the book of 3 John, but let's stand together for the reading of the word. We're going to open by reading verses 3 through 6. 3 John, verse 3. For I rejoiced greatly when the brothers came and testified to your truth, as indeed you are walking in the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. Beloved, it is a faithful thing you do in all your efforts for these brothers, strangers as they are, who testified to your love before the church. You will do well to send them on their journey in a manner worthy of God. Lord, as always, we are thankful for your word. We're thankful for the truth that is in it. We acknowledge that your scriptures are inspired, that they are given with intent, that the words that we have are here to profit our lives in so many ways. And so, Lord, we want to hear from you today. We want to receive what you are giving spiritually. And, Lord, we want to be edified because of it. And so we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. You may be seated. So 3 John, very unique because it is the shortest book in the entire Bible. In the original Greek, there are 219 letters in the whole book. So pretty short. It parallels 2 John. Sometimes they're called the twin letters. The structures are the same from introduction to all the way down. They almost follow the exact same outline. This one's a short personal letter. It's written by John. It's written to a very specific person, a guy named Gaius, whom we don't know hardly anything about Gaius. And you might say, well, wait a minute, there's a bunch of Gaiuses in the Bible. We've heard that name many times. Well, it was a very, very common name. It's like coming to Calvary Chapel and say, yeah, who's that Italian guy named Mike? You know, it just doesn't work. There's like 4 of them. Gaius was a really common name. We don't really know a lot about this guy. He's not the same Gaius you'll read about in other places in the Bible. But the situation isn't unusual. We have Christians who are out doing the work of the gospel. They're traveling. They're out to share the gospel with unbelievers, specifically Gentile unbelievers. And they have come back to wherever John is. They've reported to John that while they were out doing ministry, a man named Gaius in this unnamed church, in this unnamed community, is walking in truth. They have a good report of this man named Gaius. Gaius was faithful to show hospitality to these Christian workers, but in contrast to Gaius, we have a man named Diotrephes. He must have been a person with some position of leadership in the church, and his attitude towards these Christian workers was almost the opposite of Gaius. He was very skeptical of them. He refused hospitality to the traveling missionaries, and he apparently kicked people out of the church who were showing hospitality to these traveling missionaries. So in today's study, we have a classic good guy, bad guy contrast. And both of these guys apparently are on the same team. The good guy and the bad guy are on the same team. This is kind of a quandary. One is known as a leader in the church, for he has authority to proclaim himself a leader and to tell people they can no longer come be part of the church. Now, we look at this and we say, similar situations have played out 1,000,000 times in church history. There are individuals doing well and someone in leadership commends them for doing the right thing. We've seen that 1,000,000 times. And there are individuals who are not doing well and leadership rebukes them. We've seen that 1,000,000 times. It kind of makes you wonder, why would a situation so common be included in our Bibles? I mean, I feel like we can read about this every single week. We just get on the internet, get on social media, find somebody's blog. Every single week we can read the same story over and over again about what's going on in the church worldwide. Many people have disputed the validity of these 3 letters, and yet here they are. Because many, many more have put these letters to the test, and they've concluded that they are indeed inspired and worthy of being in our Bibles. And I've grown to trust the process that gave us the 66 books. So 3 John, no matter how mundane and common the content is, it's here for a reason, and therefore it's profitable to us and worthy of our consideration. As we look at it, there are at least three profitable elements to this letter. One, we have the profitable element of a good example. Later on, he's going to tell us, to imitate what is good, not as evil. So we have examples to imitate. So we have a good example. Number two, we have the profitable element of instruction. There will be some instruction in here on taking care of those who are doing ministry and supporting them. And number three, we have the profitable element of a bad example. Do not imitate what is evil. Gaius, our good example, was commended for doing a faithful thing, even when there were those in his midst, even those in leadership, who, because of their own agendas, opposed it. He still did a good thing. We should read this and think to ourselves, I want to be like Gaius. I want to do the right thing. Even if people of influence in our midst are opposing it, I want to do the right thing. And then we get this man named Diotrephes. He's our bad example. His main issue was one of pride. He wanted to be the boss. No one was above him. Oh, but what about the Apostle John, beloved of Jesus? Nope, he's not above me either. He wanted to be in charge. He didn't want to submit to anyone's authority. He was spreading lies. He refused to extend hospitality. And he refused those who refused to refuse what he refused. That is, if anyone disagreed with him, he put them out of the church. Now, we should read this and think to ourselves, I don't want to be like Diotrephes. So yeah, 3 John is a short letter, and the conflict within is pretty common, but there's still a lot here for us to consider. For time and culture and circumstance might differ, but these things go beyond time, culture, and circumstance. These are, simply stated, common people issues. What's going on in 3 John? People stuff. People gather in fellowship, and people issues are going to be a reality when that happens. And we are people. So I don't know about you guys, but I have, in my lifespan, I have experienced people issues. Any of you guys? Right? People. Sometimes they're difficult. So it's with great urgency that we want to look at this letter, because we're like, oh, I can relate to that. People issues. If this letter's about that, I want to learn about it. So let's look at verse 1 and 2. The elder, who is John, to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth. Beloved, I pray that all may go well with you, and that you may be in good health as it goes well with your soul. So this is the disciple John, who was sent out as an apostle of Jesus. John is a big shot when it comes to the early church. He's writing to one individual person, a person that we don't know much about. No known title, no known position. Just some guy who knows the Lord. John knows him. He knows John, and he was faithful. A person who, by the extreme commonality of his name, we know nothing about him. We don't know if he was a teacher. We don't know if he was an elder, or even if he was a leader in the congregation he was part of. We only know that he was faithful, that he was hospitable, that John loved him, and he was well spoken of. We also know that he's a man that John probably knew very well. We know this not only by his expression of sincere love, but also by his knowledge of Gaius. Of both his physical and his spiritual condition. Verse 2 shows us that John knew that things were well with Gaius' soul. So he knew him well enough to say, hey, I know that things are well with your soul. But John's also concerned with the physical well-being of Gaius. Now, it might be a subtle indication here that things were not well with his physical health. Now, we probably don't see that, because we probably see, oh, look, I see a generic expression of, I hope all is well with your health. We would say that to people, whether we know anything about them or not. But some scholars say that the language indicates, by way of comparison to his soul, that his physical health was not good. Gaius may have been unhealthy. And if John is saying this, I hope that your physical health will be as good as the health of your soul. He was good spiritually, but maybe not good physically. I once attended a church where I was told that such things would be impossible. If you have solid faith, then you will also have solid health. And I've seen people agonize over their so-called lack of faith because no amount of confession gave them healing, and they resigned themselves to thinking that they're spiritual losers. They end up drifting away from the faith because no matter how many times they proclaim faith, it didn't happen. But maybe Gaius is an example to us that faith can be strong even when the body is frail. That even when the body is frail, that there are opportunities to serve the Lord and to be faithful and to walk in truth and walk in hospitality. In verse 3, "For I rejoiced greatly when the brothers came and testified to your truth, as indeed you are walking in the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in truth." So a group of people that John refers to as the brothers have given a testimony concerning Gaius. They went out to do ministry, probably bringing the gospel to Gentiles. We'll get indication of that in a moment. And then they've come back, and John said, how has ministry been going? Oh, we've been out, we've been serving the Lord, we've been doing ministry. Let me tell you about this guy named Gaius. He took us in, he showed us hospitality, he took care of us. He was a man of great faith. John's like, I know him. I know that guy. How exciting it is to get a report of this guy that I know doing the right thing. Verse 3 says, they testified to your truth. Or to paraphrase it differently, but still correctly, they were a witness of your truth. Gaius, these people were with you in your home, and they saw you walking and acting in truth. Now, they didn't see a man who was putting on an act. They didn't see a man who was a phony, just saying all the right things. He could speak Christianese. He could say all the right things, but behind the scenes, maybe it was all fake. They didn't see that. He wasn't being a phony. He was being genuine, and that genuine authenticity reflected truth. And to this, John responds, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. John's excited to get this report. In fact, in addition to the inspiration and the prompting of the Holy Spirit, this excitement is what most likely drove him to write this letter. I'm so excited that this man that I know, Gaius, is walking in the truth. Even though I know what he's doing is opposed by leaders in the church where he's at, I'm so excited. I want to write this letter and encourage him. Now, when we, in our lives, we hear the report that people are doing a good thing, normally we want to respond by saying, I want to tell them they're doing something good. I want to acknowledge that they're doing a good thing. I want to encourage them. I want to say, way to go. I want to say, keep it up. I want to say, don't worry about the opposition. I want to just keep on doing the right thing. And quite honestly, we should be taking every opportunity to do just what John is doing here. Gaius was doing something which was both sacrificial personally and opposed outwardly. Leaders in the church were saying, you shouldn't do that. Gaius is like, hey, these guys are coming to share the gospel. I'm going to bring them into my house. I'm going to take care of them. Leaders are like, you shouldn't do that. Do we know who these people are? Do we know what they're doing? Yeah, they're coming to share the gospel. No, I don't. You shouldn't take them in. And he was opposed, and he did it anyway. Doing the right thing is not always going to be easy. Sometimes doing the right thing will cost you something. Sometimes people will tell you that you should not do the right thing. Now, I don't know if you've noticed this yet, but walking in truth in a world of lies is not easy. Doing good and doing right in a bad and wrong world is somewhat taxing. Most people have short runs of truth and good. Most people have short seasons of sacrifice and service. They can look back and say, a few years ago I did this and I gave and I served consistently in this area, but after a while I stopped doing it, and we're kind of banking on that. I've put in my time, or I've done my share of that, and then, why'd you stop? Something came, something interrupted it. Now I've grown comfortable not doing that extra thing for the Lord, and I used to do it, so I'm banking on that. And people just have short seasons. Why? Well, it's taxing to continually do what our flesh continues to oppose. Really, it is. It's taxing. I read this quote from a theologian named Steve Brown, and The first time I read it, it was kind of like off-putting. It's like, what? What are you saying? It was almost offensive. It almost felt wrong. But the more I read it, the more I thought about it, the more I realized, yeah, there's some truth in this. It starts out like this. He said, I'm so tired of hearing about the victorious Christian life. Well, that sounds odd, doesn't it? This guy's a believer. This guy's a theologian, and he's tired of hearing about the victorious Christian life. What's the matter with him? Well, here's what he goes on to say. Do you know what the victorious Christian life is? I'm going to put it up here. It's keeping your nose above water. It's keeping on trucking for another day. It's being faithful, even if just barely. It's keeping from messing it up too terribly. And then he goes on to say, we have this idea of what a real Christian ought to be, say, and think, and then we try to live up to that idea and force everyone else to live up to it too. Now, when we think of guys like Gaius, man, we imagine what he must have been like. Oh, Gaius must have been a spiritual giant. Things were going well with his soul. He was faithful. He showed hospitality to others, even when it was unpopular to do so. Oh yeah, but wait a minute. Did he get up every day at 4 a.m., get down on his knees in the gravel, and pray for 2 hours? Did he? Probably not. Did he give sacrificially to the poor, to the church, to the missionaries? Well, yeah, he let the missionaries in his house and he fed them. No, did he give sacrificially to them? Well, I don't know about that. Did he always say the right thing? I don't know. Did he struggle? Did he complain? Did he have regrets? Did he come home after a bad day at work and he's just so frustrated and so worn out? He just came home and said mean things to his wife and said mean things to his kids, almost kicked the dog. Did he do that? Maybe. We don't know the nitty-gritty details of Gaius. But John said he was faithful. So we build an image of him. We build into this idea as this incredible saint that's given to us as a good example to follow. And he is a good example. But let's not turn this man into a saint whose example is impossible to follow. Sometimes we do that. Oh, I want to serve the Lord. Well, here's an example of someone who is impossible to follow after. Well, I can't do that, so I'm not even going to try. Here's an example that we're called to follow. Don't imitate evil, but imitate good. What is good? Gaius is good. He's faithful. And there's truth in him. And he showed hospitality. There's an example to follow. Yeah, but he also probably prayed 2 hours kneeling in the gravel. I just can't do that. So I'm not even going to try. Well, when the missionaries came to town, he gave them food and lodging. When the church bully said, don't take those missionaries into your house or else, he still took them in. He's our example. Gaius brought great joy to John. And John wrote this letter and took a portion of it to encourage Gaius for his faithfulness. You know what we have here? We don't have just the good example of Gaius. We have the good example of John. When we observe our fellow believers walking in truth, we should encourage them. John was encouraged, and now John's going to encourage back. It's a reciprocating thing that happens in fellowship. 1 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 6. But now that Timothy has come to us from you and has brought us the good news of your faith and love and reported that you always remember us kindly and long to see us as we long to see you. For this reason, brothers, in all our distress and affliction, we have been comforted about you through your faith. So Timothy brings a report to Paul. These guys are doing great. Paul said, I'm in a place of affliction, but I am comforted by their testimony of what's going on. For now we live, if you are standing fast in the Lord, for what thanksgiving can we return to God for you, for all the joy that we feel for your sake before our God? Listen, when people press on in truth, they need to be encouraged. But not only that, as this passage in 1 Thessalonians shows us, we can find comfort and we can find encouragement even in our time of distress when we hear the report of others doing well. Now let me qualify. We don't need back pats. We don't need human recognition. We don't need that. We're not in this for that. We're not in this to satisfy our pride saying, it's like, well, no one told me I did a good job today. Well, that's too bad. Did you serve the Lord or did you serve them? I served the Lord. Okay, well, you might get encouraged, you might not. But that's not your motivation. It's like, no one told me it was a great sermon. I don't think I'm going to come back next week. You know how many weeks I did not hear it was a great sermon? Most of them. And somehow I keep coming back. For some reason, you guys do too. But listen, this is about the body showing love and support to one another. And I want to commend you for your faithfulness. But at the same time, I'm encouraged by your faithfulness. It's this reciprocating thing. It's like when we go to 1 Corinthians and we learn about the supernatural gifts, the spirituals. Things like words of prophecy and words of knowledge and things spoken like that. It says they're there for the edification of the body. And they happen in the midst of fellowship as the Holy Spirit leads and enables you to do it. What's happening? Supernatural things are being spoken to other people to edify them and build them up. At the same time, they're being spoken to us. This happens in fellowship. This happens as we build relationships with one another. This happens as we learn to be faithful in doing what God leads us to do. It's reciprocating. We take care of one another, and sometimes others take care of us. Sometimes faithfulness simply means keeping your nose above the water. How are you doing? My nose is still above the water. I haven't gone down. Sometimes faithfulness just means just being faithful, even just barely. We need the testimonies of people like Gaius to encourage us. And people like Gaius need to hear of our joy so that they too can be encouraged. Man, I'm doing the right thing. People in my church are telling me I shouldn't do it. But John, the apostle, wrote me a letter and said, keep it up, brother. You're doing awesome. Now, the ultra-spiritual person might say, and maybe you know some of them. None of us are these ultra-spiritual people, but you probably have met them. The ultra-spiritual person might say, I don't need the encouragement of people. I don't need that. I get my encouragement directly from God. The ultra-spiritual people say God with 2 syllables. They do that. Well, it's been my experience, and much of the Bible teaches this, that what God gives to one person is usually given through another person. Do you realize that? Oh, God blessed me. How did he bless you? He led this person over here to step out in faith to do this thing, and I benefited from it. Somehow that's how I don't need people to encourage me. God encouraged me. And God's like, well, I was going to use people to encourage you. That's generally how I do it in the midst of fellowship. I mean, that's why I have you people build community with one another so that I can pour myself into people to step out and to bless you, and you can do the same thing to others. Oh, I don't need people to bless me. Well, that's how God's going to do it. He's going to bless you through other people. Don't turn away what God might be giving you just because it's coming through the medium of a human. Now, corporately, we're called a body, right? Oh, we're a body. That means many of us are different parts of the body. We function as a body. We're united. So listen, your body, let's say you have an itch on your foot. You're like, man, my foot itches. Man, I probably should have worn flip-flops at the gym shower. I don't know what's going on down there. But it's itching. What are you going to do? Well, I'm just going to let the Lord scratch it. I'm going to let the Lord apply antibacterial to it. No, you're not. You're going to use your hand. You're going to reach down there. You're going to scratch it, and you're going to put on some of that antibacterial lotion. Your hand is going to respond to the need in your foot. That's how it works. And that's how it works in fellowship. We take care of one another, and God is the one prompting that. Verse 5, beloved, it's a faithful thing you do in all your efforts for these brothers, strangers as they are, who testified to your love before the church. You do well and send them on their journey in a manner worthy of God, for they have gone out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore, we ought to support people like these, that we may be fellow workers for the truth. Now, in this section, we see 4 things which motivate Gaius in the ministry of truth and faithfulness. First off, in verse 6, he honors God by sending the missionaries off in a manner that is worthy of God. So when he cared for the brothers, he cared for them as if he were caring for God himself. That is, ultimately, his service was not to the people in his house, but his service was to the Lord. You know what? I had this revelation many years ago. You know, I committed my life to be in some form of full-time Christian service, and I was doing pretty good in that world for a season, and then I was just stuck in this job, and I was rewinding electric motors. So I had this like electrician type job, and I'm rewinding electric motors, and I thought, well, you know, it's probably a good thing that I learn a trade. I can always fall back on a trade which, because motors out of China are so cheap, no one really does anymore. So, you know, that was God's trick. Oh yeah, you want to learn a trade? I'll give you one you can't ever use again, really. But anyway, I was just working there, and I'm like, Lord, I really wanted to be in ministry. What am I doing here? And just the Lord just really showed me all that you do to the glory of God. And so, like, I just had this revelation one day that, sure, this motor might be part of a machine from this factory over here in Roanoke, but I'm going to work on it as if this motor were part of a machine in the throne room of God. And it was just like this eye-opening opportunity that no matter what I do in the place I'm in, I can honor the Lord and I can serve him. In Colossians 1, verse 9, it says, "And so, from the day we heard, we have not ceased to pray for you, asking that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will and all spiritual wisdom and understanding, so as to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to him, bearing fruit in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God." So Gaius was seeking to walk in a manner that was fully pleasing to God. Hey, what you're doing, do in a manner that is pleasing to the Lord and worthy of the Lord. Even if it's bringing people into your house and feeding them and taking care of them, do it in a manner that is worthy of the Lord. Whatever it is you do, there are opportunities for you to do it in a way that is worthy of the Lord. This passage from Colossians tells us that this process starts with his people being filled with the knowledge of his will and all spiritual wisdom. We are created and called to please God. What is the purpose of my life? To please the Lord, to live for his glory. That is the purpose of your life. And listen, that doesn't come naturally. We don't wake up in the morning saying, man, right now I want to do things that please the Lord. No, we wake up in the morning thinking, man, right now I just want to go back to sleep. Man, right now I don't really want to do anything. Maybe eat bacon. You know, it doesn't come naturally. And he wants us to learn how to do it. You know, that's why we teach through the Bible here. That's why we do it. You know, we could spend our time each Sunday kind of reaffirming the simple truths that we learned as children. We could spend our time each Sunday talking about, you know, we're going to do a series on your finances. And then we're going to do a series on how to be a good Christian in the workplace. And then we're going to do a series on marriage. And then we're going to do a series on parenthood. And then we're going to repeat all those things and do it again and do it again. And listen, I don't, you know, a lot of people are like, we just want to teach people how to be happy, middle to upper class families with 3.5 children. That's what we want to do. Well, I want to teach people how to live a life which honors God. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're poor or if you're single. It doesn't matter if you're old. It doesn't matter if you're divorced or addicted or struggling. It doesn't matter if you're rich. It doesn't matter if you're pretty. It doesn't matter if you're ugly. It doesn't matter. You're not here to learn how to be a pretty, happy family that looks good in photographs. You're here to be filled with the knowledge of his will. For what purpose? So as to walk in a manner that is worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to him, bearing fruit in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God. The second motivation for Gaius is found in verse 7. He was supporting God's servants as a participant in the witness of the Lord. These guys were out witnessing. Gaius supported them. He was part of the work. Was Gaius out witnessing? I don't think so. We don't get that indication. We get the indication that he was supporting the ones who were doing the work. But he got to be part of it. When I say that they accepted nothing from the Gentiles, that wasn't a statement of Jewish-Gentile division. By his name, Gaius was a Gentile. This is a reference to the people that the brothers were ministering to. You know, you can say, I'm going to go and I'm going to do ministry to the people of Madagascar, but I'm not going to make them pay for anything. I'm not going to receive anything from them. I'm going to be supported by my church. That's what the idea is here. We're going to go and we're going to bring the gospel to these Gentiles, but we're not going to be a burden upon them. We're going to have believers support us as we go. They were bringing the gospel to the Gentile people. And amongst those new believers, they were not going to be a financial burden. Instead, they were depending on the believers to support the work that they were doing. And the third motivation was simply obedience to God. John affirms this by saying, we ought to support people like these. Gaius recognized that these guys were doing a good and honorable work, and he obediently helped them out. Finally, his fourth motivation, he wanted to be a fellow worker for the truth. Now, he may not have been out there on the front lines with the missionaries, but he was part of it. And we see that in the Bible, 1 Corinthians chapter 9, beginning at verse 7. Who serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard without eating any of its fruit? Or who tends a flock without getting some of the milk? Do I say these things on human authority? Does not the law say the same? For it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox when it treads out the grain. Is it for oxen that God is concerned? Does he not certainly speak for our sake? It was written for our sake, because the plowman should plow in hope, and the thresher should thresh in hope of sharing in the crop. If we have sown spiritual things among you, is it too much if we reap material things from you? What's Paul saying? He's saying some people are going to go and do the work of the ministry, and they should be supported. And those who support them are part of that ministry. When those who do the spiritual work around us reap the material support we give them, we become part of that work. You know, our church supports some missionaries and organizations who are out there doing hands-on work. We do it. In some situations, we might be the people who are out there receiving the support. Mac, who came up and shared, he received support from us for years while he worked with YWAM. But we have my daughter Delaney. She's receiving support as a missionary at Teen Missions. We have Amelia. She's in Ecuador. She's receiving support. We have David and Ellen in Spain. They're receiving support. We have Jonathan and Heidi in the Middle East. They're receiving support. We have Serve India Ministries, who's training independent pastors. They receive support. We're not out there doing any of that work, but we are part of that work. Anytime something amazing happens, something fruitful happens in those places, we are part of that. You know, it's an amazing thing. We are providing the material things. In both cases, we are all part of the same work, whether we are doing the work or providing support for the work. Verse 9, I have written something to the church. Now we get the story of the bad guy. Well, I've been looking forward to this. We like stories of bad guys, all right? But Diotrephes, who likes to put himself first, does not acknowledge our authority. He's getting slammed. So if I come, I will bring up what he's doing, talking wicked nonsense against us. Yeah, you just wait till John gets here. You just wait. And not content with that, he refuses to welcome the brothers. That means he doesn't show hospitality like Gaius did. And also stops those who wants to put them out of the church. Beloved, do not imitate evil, but imitate good. Who's he talking about? He's talking about these two men. One is evil, one is good. Whoever does good is from God. Whoever does evil is not seen God. Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone and from the truth itself. We also add to our testimony that you know that our testimony is true. So now a third guy is introduced. He's probably the guy who's bringing the letter and another minister who's coming to the area to share the gospel. But we read about this guy, Diotrephes, and we're like, wait a minute. He's in the church? Yeah, he's apparently he's some kind of leader in the church because he claims authority to remove people from the church. Wait a minute. Are there disrespectful, self-seeking dictator types in the church? Like, how can this be? I thought church was supposed to be a safe place where everything is sincere, loving, sacrificial, and affirming. How could people like this be in the church? How? Well, Diotrephes, guess what he was? He was a people. That's what he was. He was a person. He was a human. And this is a place where people come together. I was talking with someone recently about, someone said something about bears and said, yeah, we had one here that got in the trash one time, put trash all over the church parking lot. I said, sometimes we see them in our yard. I said, every time I've gone hiking on my own, like a solo camping trip, every single time I've seen a bear. I said, and it's not a big deal because I carry a little air horn. If I see a bear, I just go, bark, bark. No, the bear runs away. I said, I'm not afraid of the bear. I've blown the horn from my hammock before. I'm in my hammock sleeping and I hear that. Bears breathe heavy. Like maybe they need to work out because they're struggling. I've blown the little air horn, bark, bark, then you hear them rumbling off through the woods. I said, I'm not scared of running into bears. If I'm out in the middle of nowhere, I'm scared of running into humans. You can scare a bear away with a horn. A human, you have to smile and walk by them and hope they don't turn around and stab you in the back. You just never know what a human is going to do. People, I don't know if you realize this yet, people are sketchy. They can be. And we look back in our lives and we just look back at times we've been hurt. We've been hurt and we've been offended. Who did that to us? A bear? No, it was probably a person. I look back at my life and there have been times I've been hurt, I've been offended, I've been lied to, slandered against, betrayed. I'm in the people business, so it's a common hazard in my trade. I deal with a lot of people. Lord, how did that happen? Lord, I'm not a people person. I'm an introvert. If I had my choice, I'd go somewhere alone by myself. And yet here I am in my people person. Yeah, I'm in people business. Here I am working with people, and the Lord's like, where you are weak, I am made strong. So here I am in the people business. And I've learned that this is a common hazard in this trade. When I wound electric motors, sometimes, you'd get a cut on your hand. We had to do this thing where we would take after we wound the stator, and we got all the coils in there, made the connection, we'd have to put a charge on it, and then we'd have to test it. Oh, look, everything works. And then you had to take that lead on that, and you'd have to ground it out because there was a charge on that. And we were up late, really late one night doing this emergency job. We were in 11 midnight, this giant 500 horsepower motor, and we was in there all night winding that thing, and we charged it up and we did everything, and I was so tired. Man, at that point I'd been there for an eternity. And I hooked it up to the crane, and we're pushing over to the mechanic bench. The moment it was on the mechanic bench, I was going home because I wasn't a mechanic. And I forgot to grind it. I forgot to ground it out. And that lead was just bouncing there. And it hit my arm. And maybe, 30, 40 seconds later, I opened my eyes, tasted copper in my mouth, and laying on the ground, and the boss was looking at me. He goes, "You okay?" I said, "Did I forget to ground it out?" And he said, yeah. Had a little burn on my arm. I'll tell you what, that was a hazard. But working with people is more hazardous than that. You just never know what a person's going to do. Very, very few of these bad encounters that I've had with people, very few of them have happened outside the church. Almost every incident in my life where I feel like I've been slandered or betrayed or offended has happened in the church. My non-Christian friends and relatives, if I offend them, usually all they have to do is offend me back, and we're even. We're good. We can go forward. But many people who call themselves Christians, who go to church, I thought church was supposed to be a safe place. Who lets people like that into church? Well, our doors are wide open to broken people. Our doors are wide open to people who are struggling. Our doors are wide open to people who are still trying to figure things out. Our doors are wide open to people who are probably still more dominated by their flesh than they are by their spirit, which is why, many of us are here today. Our doors are open. We're not doing, a test of your character before you enter in. And here's what happens. In church, we build relationships. These aren't surfacey, acquaintance type of things. We build relationships, which means we get vulnerable and we try to give trust to one another. And if you stick around long enough, here's what's going to happen. Here's my promise to you. If you stick around long enough in church, there are going to be many blessings. God's going to do great things in your life. I believe that if you participate and build relationships and all that, good things are going to outweigh anything else. But if you stick around long enough, you will get hurt. You will get offended. You will be lied to. You may even be slandered and betrayed. Eventually, it's going to happen. And don't be deceived. It happens at other churches too. Oh, somebody at this church offended me. I'm going to go to another church. Give it a few months. It's going to happen there too. Why? There's people there. Well, I'm going to join the Elks Lodge. It's going to happen there. Well, it doesn't happen in my bowling league. Yes, it does. Doesn't happen with the gang I work with at work. Yeah, it happens there too. Well, it doesn't happen with my quilting club. Some of those old ladies, I tell you. Yeah. When you build relationships, when you open up, when you get vulnerable, sometimes you're going to get hurt. And when you're dismayed that it's happening in church, please be reminded that all of these warm-blooded mammals around you are people. And this is what people sometimes do. Now, maybe redeemed people, but those redeemed people around you and in front of you, they still have their struggles. They're still working things out. And you can call it hypocrisy, but I call it reality. We are redeemed, we are transformed, but it's a difficult process and it's filled with mistakes and regrets, but God is gracious and we are learning. Guys like Diotrephes are common in the church, but they're also common at the workplace, they're common at the Elks Lodge, and they're common in the bowling league. We should do our best to graciously bring them to the Word and pray that God could teach them, and when necessary, maybe carry out the discipline method that Jesus gave us in Matthew 18. But still, people like this may disrespect authority. They may put themselves first, continually seeking their own agenda. They may talk wicked nonsense against others. They may refuse to do ministry that isn't about them. They may refuse those who don't refuse what they refuse. Those people might exist. I have encountered a few people like this in my life, and it's comforting to know, it's not just me. Maybe you've encountered these people too. Apparently, Gaius did, and John was aware of it. Now, our job is not to imitate them. Our job is to imitate what is good. So from here, John recommends the next guy that's coming to Gaius' town, a guy named Demetrius. He has a good reputation. And this letter ends as did the previous one. I have more to write, but I hope to see you face to face. Let's have the band come forward. You see, this letter is packed with real life, practical stuff. When you see others walking in truth, I pray that you would be encouraged by it, but not only that, you would encourage them. Because being good and truthful in a bad and lying world is tough. May we be motivated like Gaius was, to honor God, to be a witness to others, to be obedient, and to be part of the bigger work. May we be warned and aware that not everyone we are in fellowship with will be walking in truth. And leaving the church over an offense that we have with a person, listen, if you don't learn how to deal with that and live with that and seek reconciliation, it's just going to happen again and again and again. There are bad examples, but we don't need to be overcome by them. And hopefully we can show them grace. Hopefully we can show forgiveness. Hopefully we can show reconciliation. And hopefully through that we can see people even like this guy, even like our bad guy in 3 John, maybe even see them grow and mature into a place of truth also.